like to welcome you all here today. I think you all know who I am.
No.
This is Ernie Zaki and Phil White, and I'd like to introduce you to my committee. We have Bernice Schulte, please stand.
Yes.
And you can hold your applause till the end. Andy Carapella. Edwin Cusick. Thank you, please wait. Ed Cusick. And we have a special guest. My daughter's here from Arizona, which most of you know. Some of the committee is not in here. So I'd like to let you know Pat Volpe isn't here because she's ill. Arlene Gruber is over there. Up here, please. I'm going to embarrass you. Arlene. I'd like to first, did I get everybody? Oh, Donna Rigo is not here. We have a wonderful group of volunteers. They come every single week and I work them to death, I'll tell you. I'd like to introduce Barbara Sayers, please, Barbara, the head of the Tuckahoe Seniors, and she's absolutely fabulous. Would you come up and say a few words?
That she is.
She has the most wonderful programs that you just can't believe how great she is.
Well, Alice and Phil are such a great resource for all of us. And I bet, like many of you, I've come into Village Hall and I've, glanced at the bookcases out there and seen the artifacts and a few of the pictures. I had no idea that there were over 100 notebooks dedicated to families, to the school, to sports. It's incredible what you've accomplished for a village as small as Tuckahoe. So we are just so pleased to be here at Village Hall and to see everything that you've done. Thanks.
Well, you seem to have enjoyed looking at the family books, and we have 3 family books already. So if any of you have not contributed to that, please feel free to. And those of you at home, if you were married in Tuckahoe, we would love to have your wedding pictures and your family pictures for future generations. Someday your great-grandchildren might come here and they'll be thrilled to death to see that. Okay, up here we have some artifacts. This is the Tuckahoe time capsule that was put down there in 1930. And Boy Scout put one down in 2002. So I won't be here to see it, but maybe some of you will be. And this is a bottle that they found buried in their backyard, the Rusnick family. And this is made out of marble also. It's a carriage step on Underhill Street, and it's still there. It's still in existence. And this isn't in Tuckahoe, but it's the Annabelle Diner, and I think everybody up there. That's so nice there, right? That's Tuckahoe. And Bernice's group did the Celebrate the Mural, and they painted this on the mural. They painted this in Tuckahoe, at the Tuckahoe Senior, no.
Actually, we
Jackson
painted
Avenue.
one on 46 Jackson Avenue.
Right.
And then that one was painted on Garth Road.
On Garth Road.
Oh.
And so it's a history of the Bronx River that goes from Bronxville through Scarsdale. So it's really a nice addition to our group. And here we have, in this U-Bank coffee can, we have the records of births by Philomena Fiore, who was a midwife. She was the mother of Carmela Dorenzo, and Dolores Dorenzo was the last one to have this in her possession, and she gave it to us. And as you can see, the birth certificates are very fragile, so Phil copied them, and it's very interesting because some people come in and they see this and they go, "Oh, that's my cousin." And they get so excited, and then we make a copy for them and they can take it home. But it's all the births in that, I believe, 19.
From the early 1900s up to about 1930.
So they're here if you have any relatives that might have been in that situation. Okay. Phil's And I forgot to tell you, Ernie Zaki is really the village historian. But he gets all the credit and we do all the work. He loves it when I say that. And he's going to tell you a little bit, in a little while he's going to tell you about a few things. And Phil's going to take over now, and he's going to talk about a few things. If there's anything anybody's particularly interested in, please say so and we'll cover it if we can. Nobody's particularly interested in anything?
Okay. You know, our community really has a very rich history. There's so many things that are unusual about it, and I just want to go down and scan it a little bit, and if you want to ask any questions about it, I'd be happy to answer them to the extent that we have that knowledge. We all know that, I guess most of you know that this was considered the marble capital of the world. And the marble was so unusual, it's pure white and then the little sparkles in it. And there's so many buildings that are built out of that Tuckahoe marble. And later on we'll talk about some of those buildings. We have the Bronx River Parkway here. That was the first limited access highway in the world. And people from all over the world came to view that when it was the highway to be constructed for safety and also for speed. I remember back in, I guess, the late 30s when they raised the speed limit to 40 miles an hour, and they figured, wow, well, that's very fast. And they go around the corner at 40 miles an hour. And then we had the Police Athletic League. That was started here in Tuckahoe by Sergeant Gibbons and Patrolman Mara. And when we dedicated the community center, I called down to New York City where there's a big PAL program, and they sent us up the plaque dedicated to the memory of Milt Gibbons. Yeah. And the other unusual thing is that we have 2 railroad stations here in the village of Tuckahoe, in less than a mile. It's the only village in all of New York State that has 2 railroad stations in less than a mile. Good commuting here, and we get commuters from New Rochelle, from Yonkers, Scarsdale. And one of the things that makes that interesting is the fact that a lot of the trains start at Crestwood. So they get a quick ride into the city by grabbing the train here in Crestwood. We also had a Nobel Prize winner come out of the Burroughs Wellcome building here in Tuckahoe. Have any of you read the book, The Greatest Generation? You got to read it. It really is great. And she is one of the ones they talked about in that. She applied for a job during World War II at Burroughs Wellcome, and then they didn't take women into the scientific field. So she broke the ice, and she, along with Dr. Hutchins, she had a Nobel Prize winner model and also the prize money. And then we have Arthur Fleckenheimer, and I know I talked to you about it before. Very distinguished gentleman that used to get off the train here in Tuckahoe and walk up the street up to Winter Hill Road, and he had his house right there on White Plains Road. Of course, nobody knew who he was until after he died, and they found out he was Dutch Schultz. We had presidential visits, 4 of them that we know of, maybe more. There was Van Buren, and there was FDR, and there was Teddy Roosevelt, and of course the last one was Nixon. We could spend the whole 2 hours just talking about that visit. And the very famous prize fight that they had at the Parkway Oval. Peddler Palmer came from England, and Mr. McGovern was an Irish-American here, and this fight was highly advertised. They had special trains coming up from New York City, and there's all sorts of betting on it. And the fight didn't last very long. McGovern, the Irish-American, knocked the Peddler Palmer out in 2 minutes. So those are some of the highlights of that makes the village of Tuckahoe famous. Now, there are a lot of things that we could talk about for the time that you're here. I'm going to let you make the decision. We can talk about growing up during the Depression here in Tuckahoe, and some of you I know have been through that. We could talk about the presidential visits, as I mentioned, or we could talk about the home front during World War II, or Tuckahoe before urban renewal, or village operations, the police, the highway, and so on, housing and urban renewal, or the marble industry, and some of the famous people. So think about that for a while, and later on we'll decide on what you want me to talk about on that particular history. We'll also entertain a lot of questions. We want to introduce Ernie Zaki, and Ernie, his family grew up here in Tuckahoe. He is very much interested in history. He has a living room that's really a studio. He makes his CDs and DVDs, and his brother also, Rudy, who is a good friend, won a prize for the amount of work that he did on history up in, what town is that? Pleasant Valley. So I think the love of history really runs in the family. So without further ado, Ernie Zaki. Mr. History.
Just one little thing. Down in the New York City library, there are two lions, one on each side of the library on the street, and they're called Prudence and Patience. And they were made by a man by the name of Dalton in this little town when the quarry was still working. And he made, that's Sonny Dalton's father. Sonny Dalton's father made these two lions. They're very large, and they're still there. And then after they closed the quarry up there, or the Benedict Stone, where he worked, he opened up a candy, what we used to call a candy store. And it was like a luncheonette today. It has about 8 seats. And he sold cigarettes and candy, and he made sandwiches, and he sold a piece of pie, and made coffee, and so forth and so on. When I was a little kid, I used to work for him. I used to go down the basement and take the coals out of the coal furnace and bring them upstairs and get rid of them. But it was an exciting time. That's about it.
Just a little humor with regards to those two lions that are in front of the library. They really are large lions. And Sonny Dalton used to kid, his father, in order to shape those lions, had to hit it with a hammer and chisel. So he was always proud to say he was the son of a chiseler. Someone that was born and raised in Tuckahoe and knows a lot about what's going on Main Street, Arlene Gruber.
Hello, I've spoken to you people before about, Main Street and how I grew up on Main Street and all the wonderful things, the good experiences in the store. You always knew store owners and you knew your neighbors. You knew everyone. Everyone knew each other and no one locked their doors. I mean, you didn't ever. I'd come home from school and my mother, we would have the door open. The milkman came in and put the milk in the refrigerator for you. I mean, it was all different things. But I would like to tell you about, we have these other books. I don't know if you saw the notable books. We have people in town, in the village, that have accomplished a lot, and we have some books, and we have the families, which some of you have just looked at, some of them. We don't have enough information on everyone, but if Alice, as Alice said before, if you would just give us some pictures, your wedding pictures, and what's nice about some of these, like if you look at the weddings, you can look at the Assumption Church the way it was, years ago, and how it's been changed, and it's really lovely. And but the notables books are really nice because we recognize people who have done a lot for the village, and so we would encourage. We every week we look through all the papers, save papers that have newspaper articles that happened during the week. That's how we get all this information. And we catalog it and try to do the best we can with it. And I don't know if many of you know how I got to be on this committee. I was had retired, and I met Alice one day on the street, and she said to me, "What are you doing with yourself?" And I said, "Oh, really nothing." And she said, "Well, come on down, you know." So that's how I got.
That was it, right?
That was it. And it's been a really good experience, and the people are nice to work with, and it's a nice place to have it here. So I'll turn it back over to Alice.
Yeah.
And, you know, just feel free to look at these books. I mean, you'll just come down another time. It doesn't have to be a group of people, but we're here every Wednesday and in the mornings, and it's really nice to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene. And Pat Bobby, who's usually here too, is not here today, but she has a lot of Tuckahoe history too. Is there anything you would like to talk about? Because that's pretty much our program. And so if there's something you would like to ask, Marge?
Well, you mentioned Doug Schultz, and I'm sure everybody here knows who Doug Schultz is, but I'm not sure that people my age or younger might know who he was.
And Phil's the expert.
To put that in context.
Doug Schultz was a gangster, plain and simple. And I think as the story goes, he was coming out of the movies with a girlfriend, and the FBI finally caught up with him, and they fired so many shots into him. I don't know whether they put him together after that. But some of the things I think you probably lived through, and that was old Tuckahoe. What was it like growing up in Tuckahoe before urban renewal and before World War II? You know, we had the dry goods store. We don't hear about those things anymore. Dry goods.
We
Everything.
had everything, Phil.
Pardon?
We had everything. You didn't have to leave the village. Everything was there.
Right.
Everything.
But one of the things that aggravated some of our seniors, they wanted to know, why can't we have those type stores again? You know, the clother, the fish store, the pork store, the live chicken market. You know, growing up, we never had chicken from a supermarket. You used to have to go to the live chicken market. You know, you pick out your chicken, he'd weigh it, and yeah, and you had to hold on to the legs that would run away after the we had the bakery, and we had during the summer the lemon ice man.
Right.
You used to buy a regular ice for 3 cents and a big one for a nickel. And one of the things too that I know Judge Porco talked about is that families are not together as much as they should be. In the old days, when it came to recreation, you did it as a family matter. If you went to visiting other relatives or friends, you brought the whole family.
Right.
There's no separation. The kid's going to play baseball that day, or they want to go to the movies, but you go where you're going. No, there were families were close together.
Right.
And some of the mamas would sit out in front of the buildings, and one of the kids did something wrong. No compulsion about either belting them or sending them home to their mother.
That's right.
But nowadays, it's a very litigious society, and they want to sue. But it was great growing up, and we call it the good old days. In some ways, in a lot of ways it was good, but it was a very hard life. You know, growing up in a cold water flat. Now, what do we mean by cold water flat? Yeah, you know, some of these buildings had the bathrooms down at the end of the hall. Fortunately, our folks had one inside the apartment. But you know, in the winters, it seemed that they were much colder in those days. You went to bed during a winter night. You had to dress up to go to bed. You know, put a wool cap on and throw all the overcoats on the bed to keep warm. That's just the way it was. Any other memories of old Tuckahoe?
Put a glass of water.
This isn't actually Tuckahoe, but I had friends who bought a house on Hobart Street.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it was in Bronxville, and I guess the other part was in Tuckahoe. And in the basement of the house was a bar. And the rumor was that there had been a tunnel from wherever Dutch Schultz lived to this basement. Well, they banged on walls and tapped and all that. Of course, never found anything. But
We've heard that rumor, and we couldn't substantiate it, although it makes sense that he wanted to make a quick getaway, and I understood that there was one from where that corner building is across the way to the Ward House.
Oh,
That's what we understood. There's nothing to prove it though.
yeah, this house was one in.
Mm-hmm.
There was a corner house, and then there was 5 Hobart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also see former trustee there, Fred Plastini. Fred, good to have you here. Interesting story. He's not going to like this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. He's an engineer, and he helped design the catapults for the, am I saying the right word, catapults? For the space yachts. And, yeah. So he did a lot of traveling on the airlines, but he has a very strong likeness to the Shah of Iran. And on occasion, people would look at him and say, "Oh, you want the special section? Or you want to know where his security was." So after hearing this, I called John Randazzo. He used to write for the news, and so he wrote it up that we have a likeness to the Shah of Iran. It didn't bring any extra money, though, did it?
Get a promotion.
But it was great. A lot of good fun during those days. Let me hear from you. What was it about the old days that you remember or have a strong desire to talk about?
You don't have to.
You know what I used to like when we were kids? We used to go down the Parkway Oval all the time.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we didn't hang out on the street.
Never.
We'd go down to the Parkway
There
Oval,
was someone there
And-
that watched for us.
and we used to make all little molds and, you know, different things. They had a nice activities down there.
Quick question.
What?
How do you get across the railroad track?
We used to cross the, my brothers, we used to
Walked right across.
right across the tracks.
Right across.
We were there. Instead of going all the way around, they didn't have the bridge then.
Unless
Right.
the policeman was there to stop you.
Well, rarely, never. But we used to do that, but we spent our day down there, so we brought our lunch.
Yeah. We have some.
And we had a lot of friends.
When I lived on 42, Joe Gavin's, you know, the bar there, Fred
Yeah.
Laporte,
Yeah,
and they used to play butchie.
Yeah.
Oh, the
yeah.
men.
In the yard.
Yeah.
They used to cook a roast pork every once in a while and salad. They used to
Yeah.
cut it. Oh, we had, yeah.
Anybody remember Longobardi's?
All over the yards, yeah.
And that's where the elite came to eat.
Right, I never forget Ann Sheridan, I think it was. I met a couple of them.
Jack Parr was a regular there, and Eleanor Powell, who lived up there, and the other fellow that was on honeymooners.
Jack
Marty.
yeah, he lived in
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but he was always in the village, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of good people. A lot of good people came out of Tuckahoe and made the names for themselves. They have a couple of professional football players, Eli Strand, Al Carapella, and up the line in what was known as Upper Tuckahoe, we had Washi Serini, the Smith children.
Smith
And
twins,
everyone
right?
was,
The Smith twins, weren't they?
well, there was five boys in the family, and every one of them was an expert athlete.
What about the two local bakeries, the smaller fresh bread,
Oh, yeah.
baked,
Yeah, that brings,
Alberto's and
yeah, we have the picture of the Albertos in front of their bakery shop with the old wooden pole there in front of it. That's one of the things we have here. But there was also another bakery down the street where the mamas and the papas would make the raw bread and they would send it down there, and for a nickel a loaf they would bake it for you. And it was on a brick oven type of way of cooking, which is presumably the best type of an oven, nice even heat.
Isn't that the way they make pizzas now?
They use steel now, it's all steel. They don't have the stone anymore.
Angelina
Smelled
makes
the whole street.
One of our residents, Flora Farella, she wrote a story about how when she was little, and her mom would give her the raw bread, and she would take it down to the bakery, and the story is beautiful. I'll have to make some copies and give them to you at the seniors. Beautiful story.
Yes,
When I first came to Tuckahoe, they had the trolley tracks in the streets,
yeah.
oh, yeah.
and I think it's really great that we're going to get,
The trolley.
pretty soon, a replica of those trolleys here in Tuckahoe.
See, on occasion, we get the wrong information. I thought that the trolleys ended in 1936, and Ernie proved me wrong. It was about 1929 that it ended. But it started around,
No, Phil.
No,
I
I
remember
was
Oh,
born
okay.
nineteen
I
twenty-nine, it
remember
was
waving
after.
to the guy when he used to go by in the morning.
what year?
Well, I had to be old enough to get up and wave to him.
You don't have to tell me your age. I mean,
1933, 1934,
Yes, I
and
agree.
they used to get down to
Okay.
college.
well, maybe I was right.
Yes.
The track went by Lakeville Road, and went down to college
Yeah.
on Martindale Road. And I used to wave to the engineer every morning.
She was good.
That I remember.
That was the train.
No, it was
the train.
The last of the trolleys ended
Oh,
up
not the
right.
trolley, the train. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay. Forgive.
Oh, you're talking about the trolley.
I apologize, Ernie. Ernie was right.
I'm sorry.
But there's a very interesting story I read about the greatest mouthpiece, Fallon, who actually handled a case of a murderer here in Tuckahoe, but we won't go into that. But he used to talk about living in New Rochelle, and he said that if you got on the trolley for a nickel and you wanted to get to Boston, you could just by getting transferred. But it would take a long time. But that's the way it was, you know, a nickel for the trolley and you get your transfer to the next one.
Well, we used to have a shuttle bus, Tuckahoe to Waverly School.
Yeah, that used to be a nickel.
Transfer.
Yeah, or you get a transfer, yeah.
Oh, you got a transfer.
It's such very nice memories of old Tuckahoe. I enjoy talking about it and reminiscing with people. Anything else you'd like to bring up, or any questions on any of the items that we have? Just two other things here that I know Alice talked about it, but this is the replica of the Capitol. Now, when we celebrated our anniversary in 2002, Mrs. Horvath's son-in-law works for the Postal Department in Washington, and he brought us up these relics, made out of Tuckahoe marble. He also gave us a picture of the postal building in in Washington. It was also made out of marble. So we enjoyed that. And this, another item that he gave us, is a piece of marble, and etched in there is the Capitol and another building to the side. So you can look at these later. And this was the United States Capitol, the history story of it in the back. So we have so many interesting things. And I'm going to just talk about my favorite, and that is the Vince Bellew columns. He used to write such beautiful stories. Some of them used to call him the obituary writer. Well, you know, he would talk about people that died, but also the living people, and some of the incidents of fun, sadness. As an example, he used to talk about on a Sunday afternoon sitting around to play a piano and the family singing together, which is something, again, that's lost. And the tricks they used to play on Halloween. And for those of you that don't know who Vin Bellew was, he during the WPA, he used to work for the government, assigning people to different jobs. Along came the war, and he ended up as a physical director in England. You know, for those soldiers that got wounded and were starting to recuperate, well, he'd give them the exercise to do it. After the war, he got to be the recreation director up at West Point. He stayed there for a number of years, and he came home to Eastchester, and he got the recreation directorship of the town of Eastchester. Great guy. He told a lot of interesting stories about how they had a party for the orphans in England, and some of the people that he met over there, some of the generals. We have over 400 articles that he had written, and I urge you to look at that and enjoy some of the columns. I have them listed according to the first item in that column, but each page had 3 or 4 different items. So in order to categorize it, we had to only limit the one article. But those are the things that I enjoy doing.
I loved reading his columns. I remember doing it, Phil.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? If not, we encourage you to look at whatever we have there, have more coffee and cookies. And at any time when we're out there, you have a question to ask, by all means, ask it. And our thanks to all the people that make this possible. Why don't we all stand, all the workers stand up. Stand up. Stand up and all you are standing.
Thank you all very much for coming, and I hope you know that you're welcome to come another time or many times. Just give me a call on the phone and we'll make arrangements. Thank you so much.
We all want to say thank you to Phil and Alice and Arlene and the whole committee. Tuckahoe seniors are a very, very special group. And I think there are a lot of people in Tuckahoe who really don't know about us. And we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And we're at 4 Union Place. We have exercise classes, we have Tai Chi, we do play bingo, we have speakers. And Marge Pellegrino came earlier this week to talk about the Hopi Foundation and the work they do. So I encourage, we are closed for the month of August for vacation, but I encourage any of you to come visit and see what we're all about.
Yes.
Barbara's absolutely wonderful. She does such a great